I just learned how to make this refreshing orange and ginger soda using real ingredients. Let me show you how you can do it too.
Bottom shelf, 33rd book from the left, page 53. Homemade root beer soda and pop by Stephen Cresswell. Chinese ginger beer.
Not all of the cookbooks on my bookshelf are for food, and so I was pretty pleased today when the random numbers landed on this. Homemade root beer, soda, and pop. Back in my college days, I made quite a few batches of root beer and had a lot of fun mixing up bits of root bark, sassafras, and birch and different things to try to make some neat flavors. But it's been many, many years since I've done that. And this book's been sitting on my shelf for quite a while, just waiting for me to get back to it someday. The one that was chosen for me today is called Chinese Ginger Beer. There's nothing really Chinese about it. The author says that he named it that because the flavors reminded him of some of his favorite food at the Chinese restaurants that he goes to. I'm excited about that because this weekend I'm going to an event which also features those same flavors of Asia and the Pacific Islands. It's a tiki convention. There's going to be lots of drinks there. It's going to be nice to bring my own non-alcoholic alternative. There's only a few ingredients, so let me show you. We've got 2 ounces of ginger. We're just going to grate this right into the saucepan. A little bit of orange extract, and then about a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice. That's going to be it for the flavorings. We're going to have a little bit of sugar, of course, because soda needs to be a little sweet. And it's also going to feed the yeast, which will give us the carbonation in our bottles. The first thing we're going to do is coarsely grate 2 ounces of ginger straight into the pan. And this is a young ginger. It's very thin-skinned. The recipe didn't say if we needed to peel it or anything, but this is a super soft skin, so I'm not going to bother. 1 tablespoon fresh lemon juice. Finally, we have orange extract, just from the grocery store. I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons of that. 2 quarts of water. The heat's on medium. We don't want it to boil. We just want it to simmer to let the flavors all get released from that ginger. It's been simmering away for 20 minutes, and the kitchen smells heavenly of ginger and a little bit of that orange. Stir in 1 3/4 cup sugar. And once the sugar's dissolved, we'll take it off the heat altogether, put a lid on it, and let it sit for 30 minutes. Instead of making a soda syrup and then mixing that with carbonated water to get our soda, the recipes in this book often use yeast to ferment just enough sugar inside the bottles to provide that sparkling effervescence. We're not trying to make alcoholic beverages. These are soft drinks. So he uses just enough yeast and just enough sugar to provide that carbonation, but not so much that it's going to make the drinks alcoholic. The recipe calls for ale yeast, and I wasn't able to find that here in town. I did some reading, and it turns out that for this purpose, we can just use good old baker's yeast. And I've got plenty here. We're just going to use 1/8 of a teaspoon in the entire gallon. The flavor is not going to be any different using this yeast than an ale yeast. When you're making beer, you do need different strains of yeast because baker's yeast does not tolerate high alcohol content. So it would die off much sooner if we were actually trying to produce an alcoholic drink. The yeast would die off before it got a chance to actually create that much alcohol. That's not a problem here, so we're fine just using the baker's yeast. He says to take a teacup and put in about 1/4 cup of lukewarm water and then 1/8 of a teaspoon of yeast, and we're just going to let it sit and sort of bloom for 5 minutes. We're going to mix up the ginger syrup and some water to dilute it down a little bit further, and of course the yeast. Mix all that up and then pour it into bottles. And to make that easier, we're going to do that mixing inside just a gallon pitcher. We're going to start it off with 1 quart of cool water. And then we're going to add the syrup. Now the recipe doesn't mention anything about straining out the ginger, but it seems to me that must be assumed because you wouldn't want chunks of ginger as you're drinking a soda out of the bottle. So I've got my pitcher and my strainer, and we'll pour it in nice and slow. We have the option of adding some color to it to give it that a little bit more orange hue. And so he says we can add 12 drops of yellow food coloring and 4 drops of red. I would probably just leave it like this, but I think it might be more fun, especially for the event this weekend, to have some color. 3, 4 drops of red, 9, 10, 11, 12 drops of yellow. He says that it needs to be lukewarm at the hottest. No temperature readings given, but lukewarm. And the reason for that is we don't want to kill the yeast. The yeast is sensitive to heat. I don't think it's too hot. So I'm going to go ahead and take our yeast and pour that in. So I have a few of these flip-top bottles that I've collected. These are great to have on hand for small batches of brewing like this. All that's left to do is to pour into the bottles and then just let them sit for a few days while they carbonate. He says room temperature for about 48 hours and then move them into the fridge, and they should be ready at that point. He also has this little tidbit here in the recipe. Into the bottom of each bottle, at bottling time, place a red maraschino cherry, which will soon be surrounded by a snowy bed of yeast. The effect is, well, unusual, and will confirm to the world that you have too much free time on your hands. I couldn't pass up an instruction like that. So, got maraschino cherries. We'll drop some into the bottom of each bottle and then pour in the liquid. Now, as I'm doing this, it's occurring to me that it might be a bit of a mistake. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get these back out of the bottle so that we can clean them. And speaking of cleaning, it's very important that these bottles are absolutely, completely clean, sterilized, so that there's no contamination. Okay, I was able to fill up 6 pint bottles and 1 little bitty bottle. And you can see it's a beautiful orange color. That little cherry down in the bottom for fun. 48 hours from now, I'll be at this tiki event in Atlanta, and I'm going to bring these with, and we'll try them out there. See you in a few days.
The bottles are looking real good. They're slightly cloudy from the yeast and the actual real bits of ginger that are in there that made it through the strainer. You can see the cherry down at the bottom, and then some yeast down at the very bottom as well. That hopefully has eaten some of the sugars and given us some carbonation whenever we pop this thing open. Let's try it out. Very carefully. That was nice. The cherry's rising to the top, hitching a ride on some bubbles. It's not super fizzy or anything, but there's obviously some carbonation in there. Let's pour it over some ice. Let's give it a try. Oh, that's good. There's still plenty of sweetness in there. I was wondering how much of that sugar the yeast would eat up. And it's still sweet enough that you know it's a soda. The ginger comes through nice and strong. It's not a hot ginger, so this isn't going to be like some of those extreme ginger ales, but there's enough in there you can really taste it, and it's got a nice fresh taste. The orange is much more subtle. I can taste it in there, but the ginger is at the forefront. And of course the cherry was in there just for show. I didn't put any cherry syrup or anything like that. That's really tasty. So just as a soda, it's nice and refreshing. But this is kind of a rum-based weekend. So I've got a little bottle of spiced rum here. I'm gonna try it with that. Nice dark rum floater over the top. Give it a stir. Makes a nice mixer too. I like this. And the recipe was just for 6 bottles, so it's not like we're making cases of the stuff and have to store it somewhere, worry about it exploding. Can make, a few bottles of soda for a week or for a weekend or for a gathering or something like that. Nice and easy. Yeah, I'm glad Siri finally had me try out this book. Very good. Thank you.